So, we're going to be talking about, on the one hand, a technical and, on the other hand, a non-technical technical problem, which is BDD and architectural limitations. Hi, my name is Anton. Welcome, everybody. I was involved originally in C++ and lower than that. I was involved in that for 16 years, and then I grew as far all the way up to a project management position, and then I'm a strategic management manager for automation in I'm involved in COMAQA.by. Please check out this site, join this community. Also, there is a COREHARD, C++ community. I am a founder of this community, and I'm also involved in other groups. Okay, so much about me. Raise your hand if you're involved in manual testing. Great. Which of you, as part of automation, is involved in writing real code? Good. Okay, which of you works in BDD? Not so many. Okay, but now I know what crowd I am going to work with. Okay, our agenda is pretty big. It's a three-part agenda. We have lots of things to cover. So okay, you're gonna have the presentation. You will be able to have it. But let's get straight to the question of terms, because very often it's not clear whether we're dealing with BDD or something else. What's BDD? It's behavior-driven development. Well, it seems like we're talking about testing, but in fact this is all about development. And this came from test-driven development and driven design, demand-driven design. So BDD is another kind of design, and most often when we're talking about BDD, we only focus on one aspect of this process, automated testing. We're going to discuss other aspects of this. True BDD is when all the requirements are written in Gherkin, and they are used by developers for development. Without any supporting practices, true BDD looks pretty strange and inconvenient. And also, there is an argument of whether BDD is suitable for waterfall development or is it agile, and some people even use BDDD if you don't have enough obscure acronyms. So BDD is mostly a risk management tool. This picture where a man dances a waltz with a bear. And now I see that I have the wrong presentation because it has some lines written in Russian. But no problem about it. No problem. Don't ever accept to do a project if it doesn't have any risks in it. These are my last slides in Russian. But anyway, what risks are handled by BDD? So BDD is an infrastructure to derive adequate requirements. So the main reason for the failure of agile projects is when we do everything on time, on scope, and on budget. We do everything wrong. We do it 2 and 3 times. We do it wrong. The customer must sign the papers, must accept our work, but doesn't want to continue this. And then at a certain point, the customer just runs out of money. So Agile lacks the mechanisms of receiving feedback. We're going to have a Scrum without retrospectives or with daily stand-up, but 30 minutes, but not 15 minutes. This method brings together the checks and balances taken from different other methods. And BDD incorporates a mechanism for receiving feedback, not on the level of unit tests, but on the level of acceptance tests. And we can get them together with the unit tests, and with acceptance tests, we can get the plug before the tests. So BDD works with tests. If we have ideal requirements, we do exactly what the customer wants. If there are no risks, then BDD is not useful. It's just like getting a flu shot. If there's no probability, if there is no chance of catching the flu. And there are different practices. We can discuss them for a long time. But very briefly, there are 3 OMAQA practices. The requirements should be worked out by the entire team: developer, business analyst, product owner, tester. These requirements are based on key examples and use cases, after which we get Gherkin's scenarios. Not everything starts with Gherkin, and many people don't find it inconvenient to work on Gherkin. And the specifications, so when the requirements and key examples are translated into BDD scenarios. We always have them up to date. They are specifications. They cannot be up to date. They cannot be out of date in principle. And testing-wise, BDD is a triangle: quality assurance, risk management, and automation. If all these risks are not relevant to us, then BDD is not going to do us any good. Okay, it's not going to do us any harm, but still not doing us any good. Can we do risk management with any other instrument? Yes, you can. So don't expect BDD to give you something it can't give you. So what are the risks? Let's list them. What are the reasons for mistrust? Yes, we can say, okay, we have a great team. But at the same time, we have a certain level of mistrust in each other, or lack of confidence. Incompetent customer. Well, the customer is always competent in business, but it doesn't have any IT background, it doesn't have any consultants that it would cross. Perhaps it had a bad experience working with a bad contractor, and there are incompetent or unscrupulous contractors. Very, very classic cases. Yes, of course, testers can be well certified. They have gone through a training course that is, let's say, 44 hours. But are they experienced enough? Probably not. So if there is a special case, if there is some special situation, that equals an error or a failure. Do you remember your first test cases? I know that you may even cry when you remember this, because it's very sad. The same thing applies to QA automators without any background. I remember my first code in C++. I had to rewrite the Oracle core. I don't know why I was asked to do so. I think that the people who see those pieces of code, they hate me. The same thing is true for tests. And mutual mistrust is okay. Even Comrade Stalin said so. So why is BDD interesting to business, even if risks do not apply to our team? Okay, our risks are related to manual testing. We have quality assurance, we have experienced specialists, because the customer prefers to have some guarantees rather than believe us. So this provides us with an infrastructure within we have virtually no chance of making a mistake. Yes, of course, there is a small chance, but it's very small. Speaking about risks, in order to understand when we have to and when we don't have to, when we should, when we shouldn't use BDD, this is related to quality assurance. BDD gives us test cases, it gives us a traceability metric, it gives us business-oriented reports, and they will be generated automatically. Technically, when we implement tests, we will have a minimum amount of infrastructure, starting infrastructure. We will have a two-level infrastructure, and we will also have other benefits. But with this approach, we will have a rough idea about how complex the job is. For example, we need an automation specialist. This can be a simple task. This can be an extremely complex. We know that our project is works on this stack. We know what the metrics of skills is going to be. We will see how easy or how difficult it is to find the right person with the right skills. And even though we have these skills worked out, these risk management steps, this is a list of unorthodox use of logarithmic ruler. Well, non-traditional usage of logarithmic ruler. BDD, low-level actions focused approach. Well, that's probably inconsistent with the definition of BDD. We start with the fact that BDD is an instrument of working with requirements and minimizing the risks involved in working with requirements. How is our customer going to formulate or shape its requirements? Click this button, click that button, select that item. It needs the business part, not a low-level action or page breakdown. That's wrong. That's fundamentally wrong. If we take this approach, if we choose this approach, again, we have a risk related to working with requirements. If we do everything right, we get rid of this risk immediately. Second of all, manual testers cannot write BDD tests on their own because you need to find an allocator that is stable, that is universal, cross-platform. If a manual tester can do this single-handedly, then this is a very advanced tester. And also expectations, if we talk about web. If a tester can work with waiters, then it's not a problem. It's not a problem for him or her to write the required code. The manual testers cannot write tests in BDD. Automators aren't happy because you can't invest a certain amount of time, create infrastructure, and give it to testers. And the management is not happy with the product owner because he or she may read these requirements and not understand anything. And also the focusing of BDD on page objects. This is not ideal in terms of business. BDD is a way of formulating requirements for working with teams. If we get too fixated on page objects, that's too low a level, not the right level. And again, we have a web system. We may have a web system tomorrow. Then we create a responsive design so that it can work well on mobile devices. And then we decide to create a native application for both iOS and Android. As a result, in one scenario, for web we have 3 pages, so on iOS we have 5, and for Android we have 6. So different scenario. Gherkin's scenario would be the same business-wise, but the page breakdown would be different. it's just impossible to place the right amount of elements for different platforms and keep them the same across different platforms. So we just take from the BDD monster the reporting system. And I very often hear this when I discuss this with automators. Have you worked with BDD? I don't know. We use the aspect flow. Why? Well, because we add the tests to the test method, we get a beautiful report. Yeah, but it means that you just take this cherry from the pie, and that's very childish. It's very childish to eat all the cherries from the cake and then throw the cake away. That's not the way things should be done. And what you shouldn't expect from BDD, and this requires you to understand that this is a management instrument. If the risk is not relevant to us, if it's never going to happen, then every project with risk management incorporated is more expensive than without it. If there is no chance for us to contract the flu, then we don't need any flu shots. But if we buy fruits, if we buy a whole range of antivirus drugs, if we give these shots to everybody, we have spent the money, we have eaten the fruits, we give the shots to people. To some people get sick after this because their immune system is compromised. So again, if there are risks, then BDD is okay and it's needed. If you don't have any risks, then you don't need BDD. And the other way around, if people are vaccinated, then you are protected. Of course, if you are exposed to risks. BDD is not going to save you any money unless you have real risks. On the other hand, if BDD doesn't give us anything, then you can make the assumption that, okay, if it doesn't help us, then it doesn't hurt us either. It doesn't affect the architecture. And BDD, in the context of Agile and Waterfall, as we said, BDD is a tool of working with requirements. The requirements in Waterfall are stable by definition. So if we use BDD for Waterfall projects, one of the risks is taken care of. It doesn't mean that we must use BDD, but we can use it to remove at least one risk. And one last slide in Russian. It's probably not the oldest version. So the three key problems that Agile solves: customers' incompetence of the contractor, and uncertainty of the domain of the technology. If all of these conditions are false, then Waterfall is going to be much cheaper. Even the founding fathers said that Scrum is at least 15% more expensive than Waterfall. And this is coming from Agile founding fathers, so we should believe them. So the situation when one of these risks are present, BDD is worth it. So, going back to the basics, what is BDD? Indeed, if we exclude from this equation the most important thing, the joint work on requirements and shaping the requirements based on key use cases, then it probably should be called BTT, behavior-driven testing. That's not good, and it's not bad either, but you have to be clear about the terminology used. And high level vision, UI, QA, automation, architecture. there's going to be a few diagrams, but if you fail to understand something immediately, you're going to have the presentation and you'll have ample time to understand it. So ideally, UI tests only work with business actions. It works on the level of business actions. Business actions use another layer, the so-called low-level actions, but low-level actions use page objects. And this can be implemented as simple as possible when there's only one class. It can be even static. And alternatively, this can be done in a very complex way with several media REST services. And ideally, only low-level actions work with some UI engine. And in this example, this is Selenium. Also, UI engine is a layered pie-like structure. The 3A rule. Every test includes 3 phases: arrange, act, and assert. And ideally, tests should also work with business actions. Arrange can, as Vadim said during his first presentation, can work with APIs, databases. It's kind of a preliminary step, not only involving business actions. Act should work, should involve business action, because we have to test how the final user is going to, how the end user is going to behave. And assert. And if you put this all together, you get this messy picture. But when you look at it a little bit more, you'll get an intuitive understanding of this whole setup. And now let's look at some additional entities such as loggers and tracers. Now let's discuss BDD. The test scenario is mapped one-for-one. Keyword-based solutions, for example, during the masterclass on Tuesday, we discussed fitness, the fitness instrument. So fitness is a keyword-based technique, and BDD is the next logical step of the keyword-based technique. So keyword-based as a dictionary, and BDD is a special case of domain-specific language. So this is a kind of an improvement. And we can also implement this using a fluid interface, using another implementation of domain-specific language. But this is a one-for-one mapping. For example, we have one test and then we change it. This mapping doesn't have any influence on the architecture. Business actions will be implemented as a specific Gherkin step. We are going to see the shape change, perhaps the level of interactions is going to, but fundamentally we won't have to change the architecture. We can take the simple way, the easy way, and the hard way. Now, again, if you put this all together, you get this mapping, you get this structure that shows you everything. What does BDD do? We have Gherkin. There are 3 keywords. You won't believe it, but when you translate it into Russian, you get more words. In Russian notation, there were 5 words, but in Ukrainian, it's even 7. I remember I learned Ukrainian when I was at school, but I don't know how Gherkin can be mapped to 7 words. So what does a simple BDD engine do? We have a text file at the input with 3 keywords, so we have to parse the file and extract these 3 keywords and generate another text file based on this part. This is the first kind of hands-on lab work for any first-year student. It probably takes 1 hour, but maybe there are some geniuses who can do this in 5 minutes. So a BDD engine looks like that. In a wrapper on Selenium, this includes a reporting system, a whole universe of instruments. So this is BDD plus. So this is kind of a large burger having lots of components. And it turns out that if our BDD is a code generator, we have a one-for-one mapping from business section to tests. Let's discuss some good cases. Cucumber allows you to change parameters, allows you to generate reports. But again, the situation is the same, the point is the same. It doesn't impose any limitations, perhaps a spec flow. Spec flow doesn't impose any limitations either. And by the way, spec flow says that it's Cucumber for C# flow. If your automators, technical specialists are going to say that BDD is not going to allow us to do things efficiently, that this involves a lot of limitations, you are going to say back to them that you guys are wrong. You guys are wrong. It's not a problem. And I remember.
Well, and with Serenity, last version, it's not that simple. We shall go into detail. We don't have much time. I'll show you the codes. New versions of Serenity provide you with the architectural solution, really powerful, too complex sometimes, but it's out of the box. What are the benefits? Additional guarantees. Basic BDD gives you only minimum 2 layers, tests not only in main, and reusage. It's not as much for a big project. If you don't have technical supervising, the solution will not be technically optimal. It will be acceptable, but not optimal. Serenity gives you a ready-made solution. It's too complex, with a lot of complications, not suitable for small projects, but it gives you additional guarantees. With all benefits, with all the drawbacks, it's not the BDD that imposes limitations, it's Serenity. Can architecture out of the box give you architectural limitations? Yes, of course. And now I am going to tell you in detail about an end-to-end example. This is the way the test is going to look like. It is readable as English language. James Ivan Kolya was able to start with an empty to-do list. When James attempts to add a to-do item called buy some milk, James should see the item displayed as item buy some milk. So just you read and it is plain text in English. Very convenient. But you have to pay for the convenience at once. If you see such notations, strange usages of language tools, and I am going to show you the diagram with these actors, design patterns, commands, generics. So the threshold is not small, but you get readable texts. And here you have details. We don't have the time to go into detail, and not all of you are technical specialists. The code is not complex at all, and it uses a lot of interesting paradigms, generic and other. And as a result, that's the way one of the tests looks like. Readable, easy. Yes, let us skip the technical part. 4 additional links and a list of useful publications about screenplay patterns. Serenity and the screenplay design patterns are architectural patterns rather than design patterns, higher level. So we have architecture patterns, design patterns, and some other patterns. So design becomes idiomatic, architectural becomes design. We have high-level architectural approaches. And what kind of additional risks we have, that additional guarantees? We use serious engines and not handmade solutions. Almost all automation specialists say it is not convenient, I need my own. Yes, I like my own tools, but business wants something else. In 99% of cases, it's the loss of time and the loss of quality. Now, part of the risks become not relevant for back-ends. Now we're talking about back-ends. A user doesn't reach back-end. And it's strange to formulate your requirements in back-end terms. Requirements should be business requirements, but it doesn't mean that we cannot, in a BDD style, formulate high-level requirements and then spread them to front end, to back end, and build our back end tests. Of course, a number of guarantees is eliminated in back end, but we can use this approach. You have just to evaluate back end risks, whether they are relevant or not. Dev guarantees are used. So here you can see guarantees, quality assurance risks, partially because it's not as clear to business what it means. Very easily readable reporting. Some people say unit tests are not as good in BDD. Well, how can we develop custom logic testing in business terms? That is strange. Different languages, both parties struggle with this. Technical risks. Back end and its testing depends on data, on the infrastructure. It's complex, but it's not a coding complexity. It's not a problem of code infrastructure. So technical risks are less powerful than people management risks can also be seen here. They're also less powerful. High-level vision, back-end, QA automation architecture. Everything is not difficult. The most difficult thing is to get data, to get all equivalence classes, but this is operation with data, not with architecture. It's difficult to create mocks, but if you use mock frameworks, it's a difficult question, but not an architectural one. And reuse, we have fewer levels. And architecture is simpler, although tasks can be much more complex. And if the architecture is simpler, then the limitations are less powerful. Now let us have a look what kind of toolkit we have. The main tools, if we work with the code. HTTP client, unit testing framework, XML JSON parser. These three elements of the puzzle. It can be Spring, it can be rest assured, any other element. In any language there is a standard HTTP client, even several clients. Testing framework, parsers, many. Some additional tools. And as a result, what kind of solutions we have? Tool-based solutions like Postman. We don't have architecture, and what kind of limitations we have? No, we have Gherkin scenario. We translate them into Postman, we get nothing, we don't lose anything, everything is all right. Then you can work with my screenshots later. There is another popular solution like this. People from Smart Beer said, why didn't you mention us? So we do mention them. Standard solutions. A couple of popular solutions based on Spring. This is the test. You can see that the test is not an end-to-end one. It's a point response, point request, smoke test, if you like. End-to-end tests will be different. This is steps, and the end-to-end test will consist of such steps. All right, in Spring it will look like this. There are comments and you will be able to read them later. Another option, okay. Apache HTTP client, lower level, more code, but conceptually it's very simple. The complexity lies somewhere else, and you can use it in BDD easily. And another solution in BDD style. Look at the code and you'll see given, when, then, classical BDD on top of the HTTP client. Everything is based on Apache. It's a wrap-up solution, as looks like BDT with fluent interface, and this is your test. The question is, do you need Gherkin? Do you need Gherkin? Gherkin maps onto such tests easily, and then you have a lot of examples and comments, examples and comments, and this is the style. I'll skip them all. Let me just save your eyes. What are the conclusions? Conclusion 1. What is BDD? It's a risk management tool, first of all. Second, what can BDD provide us in risk management and what it cannot provide? And the third point is almost all cases, 99% of them, speak about architectural limitations. They are irrelevant. People do not understand what BDD is and how to use it in such cases, or they just want to keep things as they are without changing anything. They just don't like change. They want to prevent change. They want to prevent change and they don't want to. So I am a technician myself. We don't like meetings. Even if they are important, short, they don't like it. Okay, let me write code and you do your managerial business. So the presentation is a summary that you can work with, write your letters, ask your questions, join the community, and we shall do our best to answer your questions. If you have some current questions, we'll try to answer them. We shall see the online question list. Now, we have a question. You have tests, you have code, and now requirements change. Who is in charge and what shall we do? Two classical Russian questions. Who is to blame and what shall we do? It's a normal situation. The question is different. Requirements may change too fast. If they change too fast, do not automate. That's all. I heard it in the previous presentation. So you have to evaluate economic feasibility of automation, return of investment. Any innovation requires assessment of ROI, return of investment. Just see how fast requirements change, fix it, because sometimes the customers doesn't see it. He just calls you and says, oh, let's do it this, just a little bit here, just a little bit there. He just doesn't remember his changes. And then when you send him 80 change requests, he is startled. Wow, 80? How do you? I just asked you to do something small. No, just fix all your change requests. If you see that automation is feasible, do it. You can have huge projects, monstrous projects, but sometimes you have much smaller projects, and automatic tests will be useful but not very feasible, because you will have too few regression cycles. How high should be description of the Gherkin scenarios? Since we don't have any architectural limitations, each high-level step can consist of 10 steps of lower level, which would also consist of several steps of even lower level, actions, calls, and so on. And you can log it in our standard BDD report. As a result, the management will get reports in understandable format, while we shall localize our error and drill down to the required level. So, as in any case, you have to find the balance, the golden middle. Is it too low? Is it too high? Well, it depends. It's up to you to decide. It depends on our education and experience. This is something that differentiates a professional from a non-professional. Do we have to write BDD scenarios to test back end when requirements change too fast? Again, it's not a BDD case. Do we need auto tests if requirements change fast? I don't know. You have to calculate, use ROI. I'll just put it down and raise the table. It's a universal instrument that solves a lot of problems, and please use it whenever possible. Have you got any questions? There is a question. Yes, thank you. A very interesting presentation indeed. And you said that manual tests or manual testers came from a different planet. They don't know what a locator is. They cannot find it. Well, if that is the case, I am a manual test specialist. I plan some automation, but that's for the future. And I cannot tell you that I don't know what a locator is or a script is. So you are not quite right. It's not about me. And you said that if such manual tester knows what it is, then he is a predator. He is not manual. Can we stress? So I don't understand who a manual tester is if he doesn't know what you said. Thank you very much for your very good question. Of course, it depends on the terms. We mentioned ICT-by certification. It doesn't work. Half of the ICT-QB terms is not used in Europe. Western IT and foreign IT, that's what we say. But in foreign IT, we don't have uniform terminology. It depends. In the USA, every tester says we're a hybrid specialist. If you wrote 3 scripts with record play, you say, I am an automator. You generated it in C#, Java, Python, and you say, yes, Java, C#, I know, I generated it. You saw it 3 times in your life, and the person indicates it. And for us, we look at the person and said, what about testers? You know testing, automation? Yes, 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 but in fact they don't. And an important tester, well-known tester like you, knows what a locator is. He knows everything, but he doesn't do automation. He just works with automation. And an American said, wow, how is that? All of our testers are automation specialists. So you have to write your resumes differently for Europe and for the United States. But if you want a locator to be stable, relative, working with different browsers, with different versions of one browser, it's not an easy thing to do. It requires experience. Of course, a manual tester can do it, but I raise a classical situation when this is not his job, even if theoretically he knows how to do it. Reading codes. The last example, it was generics, lambdas, a few design patterns, but I don't think that a manual tester without a coding experience, who did a couple of labs in the university and read a couple of books, I'm not sure that he can understand that code easily. But it looks like it's understandable. But let us write a simple code. If you didn't do functional programming, you wouldn't succeed at once. So, this is a question of terminology. The trend is that the specialists become more and more hybrid. In business, in their technical range, it's very well when manual tester knows what automation is and automation specialists know what code is. But not specialists are like that, unfortunately. So, if I send my resume to the United States and say that I am a tester, then and if we write that we know automation, it will be accepted. Yes, you have to understand their resumes and the requirements, because even between different companies, there are different terms. In one company you are a leader, in the other company you are called lead or senior. In our company it's grade 6 or a chief architect. And it's understandable what is grade 6, what is chief engineer. In IT develops very fast and there is no uniform terminology. Russia wants to be independent, but in Belarus there is a high-tech park. they want standardization. And it's very difficult, they thought, to indicate all the terms and map all of them together. It's a big job. In Belarus, they think we shall spend millions, unify tests, and then Russia will support us. Russia is waiting. The West also is not uniform, and this is the situation that we have. So please learn what they want from us and satisfy their requirements. Unfortunately, I don't have the time. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, thank you, thank you.